Awareness is the foundation of change, the essential first step toward transforming the patterns of anxiety and negative thinking that so often dominate the mind. To become aware means to truly notice the currents of your thoughts, the subtle undercurrents of emotion, and the automatic responses your brain produces in reaction to stress. Many people move through life unconsciously, reacting to situations almost as if on autopilot, without ever pausing to observe the way their mind shapes their experience. The first breakthrough in breaking the cycle of anxiety is to consciously step out of that automatic mode and begin observing the mind with curiosity rather than judgment. This is not about blaming yourself for having anxious thoughts, nor is it about trying to stop them immediately. It is about cultivating a kind of inner attention, a mindful noticing that allows you to see your thoughts clearly as they arise and fade, rather than being swept away by them. Anxiety often grows silently, hidden beneath layers of mental chatter. It thrives in the unconscious, in the patterns of thinking that repeat day after day without your awareness. These thoughts may come in the form of worries about the future, judgments about yourself or others, or fears of outcomes that have not yet occurred. Left unchecked, they can create a constant state of tension and anticipation, preparing the body for threats that exist only in the imagination. By developing awareness, you create a space between yourself and your thoughts. In this space, you are no longer entirely identified with the mind's narrative. You can observe the worry, the judgment, or the fear and recognize it as a mental event rather than an absolute truth. This is a subtle but profound shift because once the mind is observed rather than unconsciously followed, its power over you begins to diminish. Awareness involves recognizing not just the content of your thoughts, but also the patterns and triggers behind them. When do anxious thoughts appear most frequently? Are they sparked by certain situations, interactions, or memories? What physical sensations accompany them? Does your heart rate increase? Your stomach tighten? Or your muscles tense? These physical cues are part of the awareness process because the mind and body are interconnected. Anxiety is rarely purely mental. It expresses itself through the body in ways that signal your nervous system is on high alert. By noticing both the mental and physical aspects of anxiety, you gain a fuller understanding of how it operates, and this understanding is critical for change. Another key aspect of awareness is noticing the quality of your attention. Often, the mind will latch on to negative thoughts and replay them endlessly, creating loops of worry and fear. Becoming aware means recognizing when your attention has been captured by these loops and gently bringing it back to a neutral or positive focus. This is not an exercise in repression or avoidance. It is a skillful redirection, a conscious choice to observe without feeding the thought with energy. By repeatedly practicing this, you teach the mind that thoughts are not commands, that noticing a thought does not mean acting on it or believing it to be true. Over time, this repeated practice of noticing and redirecting rewires the neural pathways, gradually reducing the automaticity of anxious thinking. Awareness also extends to recognizing the narratives and stories you tell yourself. Anxiety often manifests as a mental story about what might happen, what should happen, or what is wrong with me. These stories are rarely accurate reflections of reality. They are interpretations filtered through fear, habit, and past experiences. By observing these stories as they arise, you can begin to separate fact from interpretation, reality from imagination. Awareness allows you to see the mind's tendency to catastrophize, to exaggerate threats, and to focus on what is lacking rather than what is present. This level of consciousness is powerful because it gives you a choice to continue believing the story or to let it go. Developing awareness requires patience and consistency. The mind is habituated to old patterns, and at first, Awareness may feel effortful or even uncomfortable. You may notice how pervasive your anxious thoughts are, or how quickly the mind slips back into old habits of worry and self-criticism. Yet every moment of noticing strengthens the part of your brain responsible for attention, self-reflection, and emotional regulation. It trains the nervous system to recognize when it is being hijacked by fear rather than being controlled by habit. Mindfulness practices, meditation, journaling, or simply pausing throughout the day to check in with your mental state are all tools that enhance awareness. The key is to practice without judgment, approaching each moment of noticing as an experiment in self-understanding rather than a test of success or failure. Awareness is not a passive observation, it is an active engagement with your inner world. It is the conscious choice to examine the automatic responses of your mind and to bring light to the dark corners where anxiety often hides. In this sense, awareness is empowerment. When you see your thoughts clearly, you gain the ability to choose which thoughts to follow and which to release. You begin to understand that negative thinking is not an unchangeable truth, but a habit that can be reshaped. The more consistently you practice this awareness, the more your mind becomes a tool rather than a tyrant, capable of creativity, focus, and calm, rather than endless worry. Finally, awareness opens the door to all the other steps in transforming anxiety. Without it, attempts to redirect thought, visualize calm, or rewire emotional responses are like trying to navigate a dark room. Awareness is the light that allows you to see the terrain of your mind. Identify the areas where anxiety is strongest and begin taking deliberate action. It is the starting point from which all change begins because change requires recognition. The first step toward freedom from anxiety is simply noticing what is happening inside, observing it with curiosity, patience, and self-compassion, and creating the space for something new to emerge. Interrupting the negative loop is one of the most powerful skills you can develop in the process of freeing yourself from anxiety and habitual negative thinking. The mind, left to its own devices, has a natural tendency to repeat patterns, and much of what we experience as anxiety or self-doubt comes from these repeated mental loops. A negative thought emerges, whether it is a worry about the future, a judgment about the past, or a critique of yourself, and before you know it, your mind has spun that single thought into a complex chain of fear, tension, and imagined scenarios. This loop feeds on itself, gaining momentum with each repetition until it feels almost automatic. Interrupting this cycle is crucial because the mind cannot sustain a pattern indefinitely without conscious interference. And once you learn to intervene skillfully, the power of habitual anxiety begins to diminish. The first aspect of interrupting a negative loop is recognizing its presence. Awareness, which was the focus of the first keynote, plays a vital role here. You cannot break a cycle you cannot see, and therefore the ability to notice the moment when a negative thought arises is essential. Often, these thoughts appear subtly at first, almost like a whisper in the background of your mind. If left unchecked, that whisper grows louder, attracting more mental energy until it becomes a persistent internal dialogue. By pausing and acknowledging that a loop has begun, you create the first opportunity for intervention. This recognition is not about self-criticism or frustration. It is about noticing the mechanics of your own thinking and identifying the point where you have the power to change direction. Interrupting the loop involves creating a deliberate break in the pattern. One of the simplest and most effective methods is to introduce a contrasting mental or physical action. This could be as simple as taking a deep breath, shifting your attention to a sensory experience, or even speaking aloud a word or phrase that anchors you in the present moment. The goal is to create a disruption strong enough to pull the mind out of its automatic trajectory. When the mind is caught in repetition, it seeks predictability. By consciously introducing unpredictability, by doing something that does not follow the expected path of anxious thought, you weaken the loop's grip. The key is to act immediately. Hesitation allows the pattern to continue. The moment you notice the loop, that is the ideal moment to intervene before it has a chance to gather momentum. Another important strategy for interrupting negative loops is redirecting attention towards something constructive or neutral. The mind is highly malleable and can be trained to focus on alternative narratives or experiences. For example, if a worry arises about an uncertain future event, you can redirect your focus to something you can control in the present moment, a task, an action, or even a simple acknowledgement of your surroundings. This does not mean suppressing the anxious thought or pretending it does not exist. Rather, it is a conscious choice to shift the mental energy toward a more productive or neutral focus. Over time, repeated redirection strengthens neural pathways associated with choice, flexibility, and resilience, reducing the automaticity of negative loops and creating space for calm and clarity. Visualization can also serve as a powerful tool for breaking repetitive thought cycles. When a negative loop takes hold, it often involves imagined scenarios of failure, rejection, or catastrophe. By consciously imagining a positive or neutral outcome in vivid detail, you create a competing mental narrative. The brain responds to these visualizations as if they were real experiences, and this practice can gradually retrain the mind to anticipate possibilities that are constructive rather than threatening. Even a few moments of focused mental imagery can interrupt the emotional momentum of a negative loop, giving you the ability to regain control over your thoughts and emotional state. Physical movement and sensory engagement are equally valuable in disrupting negative loops. Anxiety often involves a tension in the body that mirrors the repetitive nature of the mind. Simple actions such as stretching, walking, or changing your environment can provide an immediate shift in perception. The body and mind are deeply interconnected, and by engaging the body in purposeful movement, you send signals to the nervous system that it is safe to release tension and return to balance. Sensory engagement, such as listening to music, feeling textures, or observing visual details around you, further anchors the mind in the present moment and disrupts the habitual spiral of negative thinking. Consistency is key when learning to interrupt these loops. The first few attempts may feel awkward, and the mind may resist the change, pulling you back toward familiar patterns. This resistance is natural. The brain favors what it knows and tends to defend habitual pathways. However, each act of conscious interruption strengthens your ability to respond differently. Over time, the mind learns that you are capable of choosing when to engage with a thought and when to release it, and the loops lose their automatic grip. This process is not about perfection, but about repeated practice, patience, and the willingness to notice and act without judgment. Language plays a subtle yet significant role in interrupting negative thought patterns. The words you use internally to describe your experience can either reinforce the loop or create a sense of distance from it. Shifting from judgmental or catastrophic language to neutral or descriptive language allows you to observe the loop without adding extra energy to it. For instance, instead of saying, "I am a failure," or "this is terrible," you can describe the thought as a worry is present, or "my mind is imagining a possible outcome." This shift in language acts as a form of mental interruption, changing your relationship with the thought and reducing its emotional intensity. Interrupting the negative loop is also about cultivating curiosity toward your mind. When a repetitive thought arises, you can approach it as an experiment. What triggers it? How does it feel in the body? How long does it persist? Observing the loop with curiosity rather than fear allows you to gather information and recognize patterns without being overwhelmed by them. This investigative approach transforms anxiety from a source of power over you into a subject of understanding, making it far easier to intervene when needed. Another dimension of interrupting the loop is creating new routines that replace old patterns. When the mind has become habituated to a cycle of worry, the easiest way to break it is not simply through force, but through the introduction of alternative behaviors or thought processes. This could include practices such as mindful breathing, journaling, engaging in creative work, or connecting with supportive people. By consistently choosing these alternatives, you gradually replace the repetitive loop with new pathways that lead to calm, focus, and resilience. Visualization is one of the most powerful tools for transforming the mind and breaking free from the grip of anxiety. The human brain does not always distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is physically experienced. When you visualize a scenario with strong mental clarity, your brain reacts almost as if the event were occurring in reality. This principle can be leveraged to replace anxiety-driven thoughts with images of calm, confidence, and positive outcomes. Visualization is not mere wishful thinking. It is an active, deliberate exercise that rewires neural pathways and creates new possibilities for emotional and mental states. When practiced consistently, it allows you to train the mind to respond differently to situations that once triggered stress or fear. The first step in visualization is to create a mental environment that feels safe and grounded. Anxiety often arises from the perception of threat, whether real or imagined, so it is essential to anchor yourself in a state of presence before beginning. This might involve taking a few slow, deep breaths, feeling your body grounded against the surface you are sitting or standing on, or simply allowing your attention to settle on the sensations of the present moment. The act of grounding helps reduce the physiological arousal that fuels anxious thoughts, making it easier for the mind to engage in focused, constructive visualization. By establishing this internal calm, you create the mental space necessary for the brain to absorb new patterns and experiences. Once the mind is settled, the process of visualization can begin by imagining a specific situation or challenge that typically triggers anxiety. Instead of rehearsing fear or worry, you deliberately imagine handling the situation with confidence, composure, and clarity. The key is to make the visualization as vivid and detailed as possible. What are you seeing, hearing, and feeling in this scenario? How do you carry yourself? What posture do you have? And how does your voice sound? By engaging multiple senses, you strengthen the neural patterns associated with the desired outcome. The more detailed the mental rehearsal, the more convincing it becomes to the brain, which begins to encode this imagined experience as a potential reality rather than a distant dream. Visualization works most effectively when paired with positive emotion. The mind and body are tightly connected, and emotional states provide fuel for the formation of neural pathways. As you imagine yourself navigating a challenging situation with calm and clarity, allow yourself to feel the emotions associated with success, relief, confidence, satisfaction, or joy. These emotions signal to the brain that the scenario is desirable and achievable, reinforcing the patterns you are creating. Over time, repeated practice helps the mind associate situations that once caused anxiety with feelings of safety and empowerment rather than stress and fear. Another important aspect of visualization is the mental rehearsal of resilience in the face of difficulty. Life is unpredictable, and anxiety often emerges from the fear of what could go wrong. Visualization allows you to pre-experience challenges in a controlled, safe mental environment and to imagine yourself responding with adaptability, problem-solving, and calm presence. This pre-exposure trains the nervous system to respond differently in real life, reducing the intensity of the fear response when similar situations occur. In essence, you are teaching the mind and body a new script, one where challenges are opportunities for composure rather than triggers for anxiety. Visualization is also effective when it is focused on the present moment rather than distant outcomes. Instead of imagining an idealized future that may feel unattainable, you can visualize small, manageable steps that bring you closer to calm and clarity. This could include seeing yourself pausing before reacting to a stressful event, taking a slow breath, and responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. By practicing these micro moments of calm in your mind, you prepare the brain to replicate them in reality. The power of visualization lies in the consistency of these mental rehearsals, which gradually create new neural pathways that replace habitual patterns of anxiety, worry. In addition to visualizing external scenarios, visualization can also be applied internally by imagining the state you wish to cultivate within yourself. Picture a mind free from racing thoughts, a body relaxed and tension-free, and a sense of emotional balance that feels both natural and attainable. This internal focus strengthens self-regulation and builds confidence in your ability to remain centered regardless of external circumstance. The brain begins to recognize that calm is not a rare or impossible state, but a familiar pattern that can be accessed intentionally at any time. Physical and sensory cues can amplify the effectiveness of visualization. For instance, pairing the mental images with slow, rhythmic breathing or subtle movements, such as pressing your feet into the floor or gently stretching, signals to the nervous system that the body is safe and present. The more the body and mind are aligned during visualization, the more deeply the new patterns are encoded in memory and integrated into your automatic responses. This integration transforms visualization from a mental exercise into a holistic training for both mind and body. The power of visualization also extends to shaping long-term habits of thought. When practiced regularly, it trains the brain to anticipate positive outcomes and to approach situations with curiosity, resilience, and creativity. Anxiety often stems from a focus on negative possibilities and imagined threats, but visualization shifts the habitual focus toward constructive alternatives. Over time, the mind becomes accustomed to envisioning solutions, seeing opportunities, and responding proactively rather than reactively. This is not an instant transformation, but a gradual rewiring of mental patterns that strengthens with repetition and consistency. Visualization can be further enhanced by combining it with affirmation and self-encouragement. As you imagine calm and positive outcomes, internally articulate statements that reinforce your ability to navigate challenges successfully. These affirmations, when paired with clear mental imagery, help consolidate the desired mental state and provide an additional anchor for attention. The brain begins to associate these verbal cues with a visual and emotional experience, reinforcing the new neural pathways and creating a sense of certainty that calm and success are achievable and natural states of being. In practice, visualization is a skill that grows stronger with regularity and patience. It may feel unusual or even uncomfortable at first to vividly imagine positive outcomes, especially if your mind is accustomed to focusing on fear or worry. Yet, with consistent practice, the neural circuits associated with calm, confidence, and clarity become increasingly dominant, gradually overshadowing the habitual patterns of anxiety. Visualization is not about controlling every outcome, but about training the mind to respond with composure and resilience, creating a sense of empowerment and mental flexibility that transforms how you experience life. Anchoring emotions with breath and presence is a transformative practice that allows you to regain control over your mind and body in the midst of anxiety and negative thought patterns. Emotions, especially those associated with stress and fear, are not purely mental. They manifest physically in the body. The racing heart, tight chest, shallow breathing, or tension in the shoulders are all signals that your nervous system is activated and primed for fight, flight, or freeze. Without conscious intervention, these physiological responses can intensify anxious thinking, creating a feedback loop in which the body reinforces the mind and the mind reinforces the body. Breath and presence serve as accessible, immediate tools to disrupt this cycle. By consciously focusing on the breath and grounding yourself in the present moment, you provide a tangible anchor that stabilizes both emotion and thought. The first step in anchoring emotions is to recognize the connection between the mind and the body. Anxiety often begins as a thought, but is quickly amplified by bodily sensations that signal danger, even when there is none. These sensations can become overwhelming if unnoticed or ignored, leading to heightened worry, tension, and mental chaos. By bringing awareness to your breath, you shift your focus from the endless stream of thoughts to a physical process that you can control. The breath is unique because it is both voluntary and involuntary, meaning you can consciously influence it while it continues naturally in the background. This dual nature makes it a perfect tool for regulation, allowing you to calm the nervous system and create a sense of safety even when the mind is spiraling. Intentional breathing involves slowing the pace of inhalation and exhalation and allowing the breath to deepen naturally. A common technique is to inhale slowly for a count of 4, hold for a moment, and exhale fully for a count of 6 or 8. This extended exhalation signals the parasympathetic nervous system, which governs relaxation, to activate, reducing heart rate and muscle tension. As the body responds to this deliberate rhythm, the mind begins to follow, and anxious thoughts lose some of their intensity. The more consistently you practice this form of mindful breathing, the more the nervous system learns to associate breath with calm, making it easier to access a state of centeredness in real-life situations. Presence is the second component of emotional anchoring, and it involves directing your attention fully to the current moment. Anxiety thrives on projections into the future, dwelling on potential threats that may never materialize. Negative thoughts often pull energy away from what is happening here and now, keeping the mind trapped in loops of worry. By cultivating presence, you interrupt this habitual drift into fear and refocus on what is real and immediate. Presence can be achieved by noticing sensory input, what you see, hear, feel, and even smell. Paying attention to these tangible experiences pulls the mind away from abstract anxieties and back into a state of grounded awareness. Presence is not merely observation. It is a conscious choice to engage with the reality of the moment rather than the imagined possibilities of the future or the regrets of the past. Combining breath with presence creates a powerful synergy. As you focus on the rhythm of your inhalation and exhalation, you can simultaneously notice physical sensations, sounds, or visual details around you. This dual focus strengthens the mind-body connection and helps to stabilize emotional states. For instance, if a wave of anxiety arises, you can feel the breath moving in and out of the body while observing your surroundings, the texture of a chair, the sound of distant traffic, or the sensation of feet pressing into the floor. These anchors remind the nervous system that you are safe, that the body is supported, and that the mind does not need to react to imagined threats. Over time, repeated practice builds resilience, allowing calmness and clarity to become accessible even in challenging circumstances. Anchoring emotions with breath and presence is also about learning to respond rather than react. Anxiety often triggers automatic reactions, racing thoughts, tense muscles, and impulsive behaviors that escalate the sense of fear. By focusing on breath and grounding attention in the present, you create a brief pause between stimulus and response. In this pause lies choice. You can choose how to act, how to respond, and how to direct your energy. Even a few seconds of mindful breathing can interrupt the chain reaction of fear and allow a more measured, conscious response to emerge. This is the essence of emotional mastery, not denying anxiety, but observing it, grounding yourself in the body, and deciding intentionally how to proceed. Visualization can be integrated with breath and presence to amplify their effects. As you breathe deeply and anchor yourself in the moment, imagine a sense of calm radiating through your body, filling each area of tension and dissolving discomfort. Picture yourself handling a challenging situation with composure, responding to stress with confidence, and maintaining clarity despite external pressures. The combination of physical regulation and mental rehearsal strengthens neural pathways associated with calmness, making it easier for the mind to access these states automatically in the future. Breath and presence create the foundation, while visualization reinforces and extends the new emotional patterns. Another key aspect of this practice is developing self-compassion and non-judgmental awareness. When anxiety arises, it is common to become frustrated or critical of yourself for feeling it. However, judgment adds fuel to the emotional fire, intensifying the physical and mental reactions. By gently observing emotions without labeling them as bad or wrong, and by using the breath as an anchor, you create a safe internal environment where anxiety can exist without taking over. Self-compassion signals to the brain that the situation is manageable and that the body does not need to remain in a heightened state of alert. This reduces the intensity of physiological arousal and fosters a sense of ease and balance. The benefits of anchoring emotions extend beyond moments of acute anxiety. Regular practice strengthens the nervous system over time, creating a baseline of resilience and emotional stability. The brain begins to recognize calmness as a default state that can be accessed intentionally, rather than anxiety being the automatic response to uncertainty or challenge. This resilience permeates daily life, influencing interactions, decision-making, and the capacity to remain present and composed in diverse situations. Anchoring emotions with breath and presence is not a temporary fix. It is a skill that rewires the mind and body for lasting emotional balance, giving you the ability to navigate life with clarity, confidence, and ease. Rewiring the mind through consistent practice is the culmination of all the previous strategies and the essential step in transforming the relationship you have with anxiety, negative thinking, and stress. The brain is an extraordinarily adaptable organ, capable of reorganizing itself through a process known as neuroplasticity. This means that habitual patterns of thought, whether positive or negative, are not fixed. They can be reshaped through deliberate and repeated mental and behavioral exercises. Consistent practice is the bridge between understanding and transformation. It is what converts insight into lived experience, knowledge into resilience, and intention into lasting change. Without consistency, even the most profound strategies remain theoretical, and the mind reverts to old, familiar pathways. The first principle of rewiring through practice is repetition. Just as muscles grow stronger through repeated physical exercise, the neural circuits responsible for specific emotional and cognitive patterns strengthen with repeated activation. When a thought, behavior, or response is practiced consistently, the synapses between neurons become more efficient, forming reliable pathways that the brain can activate automatically. This is why it is not enough to occasionally pause, visualize, or focus on breath. The power lies in making these interventions habitual. Repetition does not mean mechanical or joyless repetition. It means actively engaging the mind and body in exercises that reinforce calm, focus, resilience, and constructive thinking, day after day, until they become second nature. Consistency also builds confidence and self-efficacy. Anxiety often stems from the perception of unpredictability or lack of control, and repeated practice teaches the brain that calmness, clarity, positive thought patterns are attainable and reliable. Each time you successfully navigate a challenging moment using techniques such as mindful awareness, visualization, breath work, or presence, you reinforce the belief that you are capable of choosing how to respond. This growing confidence gradually displaces the helplessness and fear that once dominated your reactions. Over time, your nervous system learns that stress and anxiety are not threats that must dominate your attention, but signals that can be observed, understood, and transformed through intentional action. A crucial element of rewiring is the combination of awareness and intervention. Consistent practice is not merely about performing exercises, it is about cultivating conscious attention to your internal states and deliberately choosing how to engage with them. Awareness allows you to recognize when negative thought patterns or anxious states arise, and intervention allows you to redirect mental energy toward healthier patterns. This cycle, notice, intervene, repeat, is the mechanism through which new neural pathways are formed. Without awareness, practice can become rote and mechanical, and without intervention, old patterns remain entrenched. The power comes from the integration of both, creating a feedback loop that strengthens adaptive responses and diminishes the dominance of habitual anxiety. The concept of small, incremental steps is also central to rewiring. Transformation does not occur instantly, and attempting to force rapid change can create frustration or resistance. Instead, consistent practice involves taking manageable, achievable actions each day that reinforce desired mental and emotional patterns. This could include setting aside a few minutes for focused breathing, visualizing positive outcomes, observing negative thought loops without judgment, or pausing to ground yourself in the present moment. Each small act compounds over time, gradually reshaping neural circuits and creating a more stable, resilient mind. Like water slowly carving through stone, these repeated, gentle interventions produce profound structural change in the brain and in lived experience. Another essential aspect of rewiring through consistent practice is patience. Neural change does not happen overnight, and the brain initially resists disruption of familiar patterns. When a thought pattern has been reinforced for years, it takes time to weaken the old connections and strengthen new ones. During this process, moments of doubt, frustration, or perceived failure may arise. These moments are not setbacks. They are natural parts of the rewiring process. Patience allows you to persist in practice without judgment, understanding that each attempt contributes to long-term transformation, even if immediate results are not apparent. Over time, the cumulative effect of patient, deliberate practice produces a profound shift in mental and emotional habits, increasing your capacity for calm, focus, and constructive thinking. Consistency also benefits from creating structured routines. The brain thrives on patterns, and embedding practices such as mindful awareness, visualization, or breath work into daily life ensures repeated engagement. This could involve starting the day with a focused breathing exercise, pausing midday to observe thoughts without judgment, or visualizing positive outcomes before facing a challenging task. Structured routines provide both predictability and reinforcement, which accelerate the formation of new neural pathways. By embedding practice into the rhythm of daily life, you make transformation not a special effort, but a natural and ongoing aspect of existence, gradually replacing anxiety-driven patterns with reliable, empowering habits. Integration of multiple strategies amplifies the effects of rewiring. Practices such as awareness, interrupting negative loops, visualization, and anchoring with breath and presence complement each other and work synergistically. For example, becoming aware of a negative thought loop allows you to interrupt it, visualize a calm and positive outcome, and anchor your emotions with breath and presence, all within a single experience. Each layer of intervention strengthens the overall transformation, reinforcing neural pathways associated with choice, composure, and emotional regulation. Consistent integration of these methods ensures that new patterns are deeply embedded, flexible, and resilient in the face of real-world challenges. Tracking progress and reflecting on experiences is another powerful tool in the process of rewiring. By observing how your mind and body respond over time, you gain insight into the effectiveness of your practice in areas that require more attention. Reflection reinforces learning, making the brain more receptive to ongoing change. Additionally, acknowledging even small successes cultivates a sense of accomplishment and motivation, which supports sustained practice. Rewiring is not a passive process. It is an active engagement with your mind, where conscious attention, repeated effort, and self-reflection combine to produce lasting change. Finally, rewiring through consistent practice fosters a profound sense of empowerment and autonomy. Anxiety and negative thinking often create a perception of being at the mercy of internal and external circumstances. Through deliberate, repeated practice, you reclaim control over your mental and emotional states, proving to yourself that calm, clarity, and constructive thinking are not just ideals, but attainable realities. Each day of focused effort strengthens new pathways and diminishes old patterns, gradually transforming not only how you think and feel, but also how you experience life, how you relate to challenges, and how you respond to uncertainty. The journey of transforming your mind and breaking free from anxiety and negative thinking is not a single event, but a deliberate, ongoing process. Each keynote recognizing and interrupting negative thought patterns, cultivating mindfulness and awareness, visualizing calm and positive outcomes, anchoring emotions with breath and presence, and rewiring through consistent practice builds upon the others to create a holistic system for mental and emotional mastery. By consistently applying these principles, you train your brain to respond differently to stress, to see challenges as opportunities rather than threats, and to reclaim control over your thoughts and emotions. This transformation is grounded in your own conscious effort and willingness to engage with your mind in new ways. It is about noticing the subtle patterns that shape your daily experience, intentionally shifting your focus, and reinforcing healthier habits until they become second nature. Over time, these practices cultivate resilience, clarity, and inner peace, creating a foundation from which you can navigate life with confidence, composure, and purpose. Remember, change does not require perfection. It requires commitment, patience, and self-compassion. Each breath, each moment of awareness, each visualization, and each mindful choice contributes to rewiring your brain, shifting the balance from fear and worry to calm and empowerment. The power to transform your mental landscape lies within you, and with consistent practice, the life of clarity, focus, and emotional freedom that you imagine is not just possible, it is inevitable.